Give me a second, peeps.
On us, no charge needed. And 4 lines for just $25 a line.
I've always noticed it, but I've never thought to myself. It seems so obvious now, but I've never thought to myself, oh yeah, you can't tell Rihanna's story without talking about Barbados.
Exactly.
The music, the way she sees the world, the way she interacts with the world, the fact that she's still, a citizen of Barbados, like all of these things inform how she goes.
And that she still has a Bajan accent.
That's true.
Yeah.
So if I said that phrase to her, she'd know what it means?
Of course.
So how do I say it? No, how do you say the phrase?
Dan fair.
Dan fair.
You gotta treat people fairly.
But you said Dan fair.
Dan fair.
Dan fair. I'm gonna work
But you have a good Bajan accent already.
I'm working with yours at Dan fair. I'm gonna learn it. I'm just gonna say it to people Dan fair. I'm gonna get there. I'm like, Rihanna, you can invite me to your party, Dan fair.
Exactly.
Yeah, now we're on. This is what happened.
Good day, people. Come with me as I cook.
Prime Minister Mia Mottley, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Trevor.
I was thinking of every possible question I could ask you because you're one of the most brilliant thinkers I know. You're also one of the most original human beings I've ever met. And as I was going through everything I could think of, I went, there's one pressing question I've always wondered and I've always wanted to ask you. And that is, does it ever bother you that most people think Rihanna is the Prime Minister of your country?
I wish you was. Yeah, they would spend more time on the beach. No, Rihanna is phenomenal. I mean, look, Rihanna has made Barbados known in places and like people that would not otherwise have known. I mean, we like to think that everybody knows about Barbados. That's what happens when you come from a small nation.
I know it's like,
But the truth is that she really has extended the boundaries for us, and she has defined excellence. And I want to speak to it because people don't appreciate that I genuinely feel that she is the biggest movement because of how she was released. Barbados is a place that social justice matters. If you go to a region, first thing you think, man, they cannot fear that money. That is fear. Everything is about fairness, justice. And Rihanna, when she decided to go into business, said, look, I'm going to do a makeup company. Because guess what? Everybody's been doing makeup for certain colors and certain groups. I'm going to do it for everybody. Because everybody matters. Everybody must be seen. I keep talking about seeing, hearing, and feeling people. She did it. Then she wasn't satisfied with that. She said, I'm going to do a lingerie company. And then you look at the shows, and the lingerie is for every shape and size. Those who are fit, those who have been made, those who are disfigured, for everyone. And that sense of inclusion, that sense of social justice that was instilled in her from birth, that was reinforced in her in school, is what she's living. So when people ask, why is she successful? Because she's authentic, because she's real, because she's living out what really matters. And that sense of fairness and inclusion, the world is into with her.
I think it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I always noticed it, but I've never thought to myself. It seems so obvious now, but I've never thought to myself, oh yeah, you can't tell Rihanna's story without talking about Barbados. The music, the way she sees the world, the way she interacts with the world, the fact that she's still, a citizen of Barbados, like all of these things inform how she goes.
And that she still has a Bajan accent.
That's true.
Yeah.
So if I said that phrase to her, she'd know what it means.
Of course.
Wait, how do I say it?
You still have
No, the fair. How do you say the phrase?
Oh, damn fair.
Damn
Oh,
fair.
you got to treat people fairly.
But you said damn fair.
Damn fair.
Damn fair. I'm gonna
Well, you
go.
have a good Bajan accent already.
I'm damn fair. I'm gonna look. I'm trying to say something damn fair. I'm gonna get it. We are keeping this right here, funny. Damn fair.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now we are.
And then next time, you see when you're inviting, then they can venture to say, where's we? And he's one also favorite.
That's the most powerful.
Okay, where's we?
Damn fair. I almost feel like that's a perfect place to start a conversation because if we think of Rihanna as a concept and as an idea, you have a single human who has had an outsized impact on the world. They came from a place that many would have considered insignificant. They started in a place that many people would have considered unremarkable, and yet there's no denying that music, fashion, beauty has now been shaped by this person. I feel like your journey and the journey of Barbados has been very similar.
The truth is that the journey of Barbados before has been there for good and bad reasons. Let's start with bad.
Yeah.
Barbados was settled, in fact, this is 400 years this year that the British first landed. But then history was written that they were the first, although we now know that people were probably there who came from Europe, but the story that nobody told was the Americans who lived there for centuries. And who at the time when the British came, there was evidence of settlements and life, but nobody had been living on the island at the time. I start there, then carry to the fact that the modern story of Barbados is shaped by the British conquest. And they started a parliament in 1639. It's the third oldest in the Commonwealth. And they passed a law which really is something that we are not proud of at all. And it became the structure for modern racism and institutional racism as we know. And it was a bedrock for slavery. It was the 1661 slave code passed by Barbados Parliament. It was followed in Jamaica, it was followed in South Carolina, it was followed in Georgia, it was followed in Africa. Almost all of the countries in the Americas used that 1661 slave code, which denied the humanity of black people as a basis for the thing. The British treated Barbados as a jewel in the crown. It was a producer of sugar. It was, for them, the earner of great wealth.
Yeah.
And it was also the place by which they understood how to control and denigrate black people as slaves. So that we feel, as modern independent Barbadians, that we have a duty to pay forward. And that duty to pay forward is as a result of that history. Now, there were other things that happened at the time because of how important the colony was to the British. So after King Charles took back over from Cromwell, the European patrons, he gave some of the planters in Barbados land in the Carolinas. And therefore, there is a huge impact of Bajans and Bajan slaves moving into the Carolinas. the linkages between charity and transform and not have it to that yeah, and you know, also believe that we need to work because if they want to link between the awareness and in addition, prior to that, when the lawyers trying to get from work, they had the charter of our medicine to 251, which they say 125 years before the definition of medicine and family. Really spoke to a lot of the things in terms of the representation. One of the things we get into the you see what I was happening up to defend the way to what is true. In a sense, therefore, I don't think it's really for them and sense for us to be as a country because it really has always had that position. Yesterday, about social media, picture came up with the carbon independence for about and his wife, Mr. President Lyndon Johnson, saying, you see, and the story goes at that time that President Johnson said to this Minister moving independent country. The Organization of American States, the U.S. will pay your Jews to join. And this is our say, so we're all Jews, yeah. Right, that's not. In the category of Jews in Israel. And he knew that story, as well as in his first speech to the United Nations, he declared that he would defend the laws of Israel. So there's a strong sense of dignity, a strong sense of our responsibility to maintain to you, especially because of what we went through. And that does not mean that we are more powerful than we are, because at the end of the day, science proves us. But one of the things about leadership and dignity, because when you talk about size, I think it is important to understand the size of Barbados. What's the current population? There's probably about 270,000. Okay, yeah, that's 300,000 was just under 300,000. We actually regrettably declined, and we're right now going through a whole conversation for further market. Is that because people have been leaving? Part of it is that, but part of it is that we've done a damn good job of family planning. Family planning has been strong in the country from the 1950s. You know, this is one of the things that feels like one of the greatest conundrums that the world is facing. Yeah. Right? Actually, I was having a conversation with my mom about this. Okay. So my mom was asking me what I think about marriage, when I'm going to get married, you know, all of these questions, but not pressing. And and then I said to her, one of the things I've been pondering is how much of our advancement has limited the natural progression of what it is to be human. Because now you have to choose to make a family. Back in the day, you know, if we think about this is only in this century, you just didn't, and you couldn't. You know what I mean? Obviously, there's like old, you know, I've seen like ancient prophylactics and things, but for the most part, people just had kids because they had kids. Like, how do you begin to think about this idea? You know, we see people say, are trying to get this, is it that some people would say it is two nations? So it is. I mean, look, in the Caribbean, the first thing I did when we wanted to leave in 2018 was to create a national population initiative. Because I was serving as Minister of Education many years ago here, and I was just from the man going to school. We had a problem. In those days, I had 4300 kids a year.
Yeah.
When I came in, just in 2018, it was down to about 2,500, 2,600, 2,700, something like that. Yeah. And now, the ones who are more in state are like 2,200. So that you can clearly see a sharp decline in 30 years. And if I go to other countries in the region, we give context. Ghana, that is the fastest growing country in the world. Ghana is because of the war. Okay, there goes. But Ghana's population, in spite of it being the same size as the United Kingdom is 65 million. Ghana is struggling to be a million. Let's go to Belize. Belize is the same size as Israel. Israel is 8 million. Belize is 420,000. Suriname is just larger than the Netherlands. The Netherlands is 70 million. Suriname is 580,000. And if I take Barbados, Singapore grew itself literally by reclamation of land. I think they've got like 30 or 40%. Yeah. They're more or less a little bigger than Barbados. They're 5 million. I'm struggling to get 300,000. So you have this.
You hear that, people? These countries is like them not have nobody. Barbados only have like almost 300,000 people. Yo, what are we doing in these countries?
It's because people are
Like people who
able to choose
like
to have kids, or because people are
we need to
choosing
move to these countries. Like seriously. I think the government of this country needs to be giving people money to have kids. Because if the population is declining that much, it's a simple fact. Just give every family every year, the equivalent to like 100,000 US to every family member. You know what I'm saying? And you'll surprise how much kids people gonna start having again. And this is what they don't understand. Everybody's saying that in every country, the decline of the population. But they are not understanding that people are choosing not to have kids because they can't afford it. So, while you have one set of people getting rich, population is going down. This is why you have these rich people start building robots. And they swear that robots is going to be able to take over the human. It's not. No matter how much they try, it's not.
I fear that the conversation about immigration and migration is not racism, rather rooted in the needs of the country. I think that people are fearful of becoming a minority in their own country, and that's natural. We can't do that. But at the same time, without the influx of people, we're not going to be able to stay away and get the growth that we need as a country. And one of the problems is that in the world we have worked up over more money. Nobody worries about over more money growing. But as soon as you start talking about more people, everybody gets nervous. And in 2020, December 2020,
because if the population is going down so much, like I say, it's an easy fix.
That you need a proper view from migrants. This notion that people happen to drown just because they want a better life, when countries elsewhere actually need them and can provide opportunity and dignity to them. Something is fundamentally wrong. And recognize that's one of the things that I can say we can fair people. We are unfair people, and we're seeing people die unnecessarily when we can have a structured program. And part of it comes back to disciplining the most people don't want to leave their own country. They move because they're from the country. They're running from something or running away from it. And if we could get this basic agreement going, that we're certain things that we need to do, the station that we can become the secondary, and not the people that we need to do, but not just having to just let everyone in the world must have a basic education that allows them to learn at any stage of their life. That basic education is very basic. The opportunity to play football or cricket or whatever sport you like or road tennis. People talking people more and more to do from practice and people road tennis. Okay, road tennis can play.
What's it called?
Road tennis.
Road tennis.
Yeah.
And what is road tennis?
The guys at home made these rackets that they play with.
Okay.
The net is effectively what, 6 to 9 inches off the ground. So you need hard to, so if you're not fit, you can't play. So even I got a little trouble sometimes. And they'll take off. And you can play, because the size of the tennis board is played on the road, and that's it. So it's
I mean,
more
this feels like
perfect
it's
for inner city areas and those.
Well, there's no cars.
Yeah,
But
but
you
you
can
know,
next time, no, what happened to the road test?
so we stop. We never. When you come to Bangladesh,
I'm actually gonna come and see it. You know, so it's funny, it's South Africa. I mean, most places in the world, like, you know, friends of mine grew up in like Harlem, the same story that I have growing up in South Africa in townships where you just close the road, you play the game, and when a car just come through, you come through. But I think if I'm pitching this as like an Olympics sport, it's gonna be tough to pitch this idea that we're closing the road. But okay, we'll get it. I'll come to the Olympics.
the Olympics will be what we can.
But I think that's what will make it interesting. If you want to get viewers, you need to come. That's a real goal.
We can do that.
Yeah, if you finish the match, you get a medal. Yeah, I love that you bring up the idea of thinking of new ways to think. 'Cause that's really what inspires me most about you is whenever I see you speak, and whenever I've been lucky enough to have like two conversations I think with you, every time I've left our conversation thinking, oh wow, nothing is fixed. There's new ideas in there on everything. You know, like immigration. We all think of immigration as this fixed idea. It was people going somewhere, and that was it. Do you think there's ever a world where, like you say with money, do you think there's ever a world where we find a way for people to go work and go back to their country?
We used to do that in our structured way. But because the world hasn't created, governments haven't created the opportunity. But we create movement, we create treaties that allow for movement to community. We create opportunities for people to invest.
This is your potato, people.
I feel that's important enough for us to create a virtual community where you need these skills. I mean, look, in a very small way, we've had a family program in Canada, the Caribbean, people have gone through years, they go, they work, they come back. It's a structured thing.
And do you see that in that works like us?
It works well because it helps the farmers in Canada.
Yeah.
And it helps the person that who don't have work at the time.
Right. So get the labor where the labor is needed, and then get the money where the money is needed. So you just bridge the gap, basically.
And technology actually allows us to do it in a very seamless way now. So that to my mind, if we just roll up our skills a little bit and give it a little effort, we could do a lot more. Let's take Africa. Every time we go to Africa, the amount of young men you see on the roads, it's waiting for work, looking for opportunities. And let's say, look, there are other parts of the world that are in serious need of people. And I'm not talking basic manual labor, I'm talking skills at all levels.
Yeah.
And I genuinely feel that if we can create the right framework for the movement of skills and labor, that the world will be far better than today.
When you share these ideas with other world leaders, do they see the possibility or like I was wondering, when you're having these conversations internally, are world leaders being pushed by the people or are they the ones pushing the people? Which way does it really go?
You have the ability to push it. But I know you will not facetiously. The world leaders are politicians. Most of them who operate in democracy rely on people's votes. And the people have the ability to shape the work of their leaders, as well as leaders have the ability to match the population. I genuinely feel that there are things that we are going to have to do at a popular level globally in order to be able to see the status quo of our move. Because why would we change what we're doing going forward? And what we are asking after the change in our relationships and the status quo of how people are treated when we move beyond borders. And that is going to require a little more effort. Look at the conversations that are happening across North America, across Europe. Look at them. And regrettably, in some other countries, it's becoming far too forth. But could the USA be the USA if it is not united?
Is it?
Yes, that anyone can come and do whatever they want to do. That is a senior business. And then let's look at biology. I didn't look at biology in school, but any instrument, any organism that closes in and that doesn't open up dies after days. So I really feel that the problem that we're facing is the drowning of the world. The drowning of the world. That Lapazaz was famous for convincing the drowning, said it all the time. It's the drowning of the world. So that you see, when you let too many people come in and people start to mix, in a sense, everybody is beginning to get the same stuff. And that frightens people. Because love knows no boundary.
That's true. That's true. I mean, I'm saying it. But so, but you know what I sometimes think is, I think us seeing the drowning of the world as one of the factors is completely correct. But I often wonder if this is not a natural byproduct of people experiencing a standard of living that declines over time, and then they start to point somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, because like if you look at Europe itself, some of the biggest wars that have ever been fought only involve white people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were just fighting with themselves about themselves, and so whenever I read these stories throughout history, I go, oh wow, it doesn't matter. Ground is almost an easy thing for somebody to pick on now. When you get rid of that, someone will find something else, and somebody will find something else. And so I also wonder, yeah.
I think that there is a definite contribution to special equity.
Yeah.
And the fact that people who could have believed that this is implement that they expect to now realize that that is not beyond them, and this country happened with the industrialization that left, and therefore strong, credible, dignified jobs were all of a sudden taken from people, and those jobs sustain families. But let us not forget as well that there is still revenue and kinds of differences in the world. Oh, definitely, and I think a combination of all of those things to create that sense of almost despair. And the despair has led then to anger, and the anger has led to shutting out people. Having learned history, and civilization has conquered the life by sharing it. When living alone, however, the ground is getting it. I was definitely have to get real before we get better, before we learn that we were simple. And that the value of power depends on the way doing the right. Yeah, that's the really time to this process can take over the world. We would like that.
Let's look at Barbados in isolation, because I think it's the same problem that other countries are going to face. Thinking about their populations, how they replenish them, how they keep skills, how they keep growing sustainably. Have you seen any countries that have got
People,
rights?
banana in Jamaica. If you did go use banana in Jamaica, I would put on gloves. I would never, but me just go do it this way. Cause banana in Jamaica, you get the stain. Them are sitting here where you get in America, the stain is already out of it.
I'm not passing judgment on you, I'm just noticing that, you do grow and you do succeed in create those opportunities. Yeah. I think you were absolutely correct and also making the point that in those parts of the country where people were delayed or didn't have the ability to move at the same level and to increase their quality at the same level, they then assume that it's because of a foreign, it's because of not saying the same in France, the same thing. Remember when Angela Merkel brought in 1 million people, right, from Syria, and it was like a shock from the ground because she understood that Germany was facing the worst possible future. a declining and aging population. The irony is that's what we're facing most of these countries. The ECLA agency predicts that Barbados, that one in every two people will be over the age of 65 by the year 2050. One of the two are crazy. It's not regulation. Yeah. And in the case of Jamaican, for the last 79-40%. So those are really things that we have to solve. Yeah. So we spend 20 years away from that. At the same time, the Caribbean then has to cotton as almost most of the largest individuals in the world. It's not all, but most of it. We have African American, we have Asian, Middle East, we have Indian, Chinese, we have Middle Eastern, and we have the traditional Indian, most of them will take note. The convention in Delhi is still on the afternoon, on the day of the trial. So we still have a few. I like to believe that the Caribbean, because of our history, has a story to tell to the rest of the world and an example to share with the rest of the world. Nothing perfect, many stretch of the imagination, but for the most part, we have been able to bring about development to our people in the post-colonial environment that sees people, that feels people, that hears people, that recognizes that, look, okay, we need to provide education, shelter, housing, etc.
Yeah.
We haven't done it for all yet, but we're on that pathway. Not everybody's done on the train, there's a lot happening. And when you start to compare it to other countries and other regions in the world, you begin to see that. The difficulty has come in that in many instances, small states have had rules enforced on them that don't make any sense. I mean, for years, the last 30 years, we've been arguing in the WTO that we need special and differential treatment as small states, and that my percentage share of global trade in goods is 0.000%. And my percentage share of global trade in services is 0.001%. So we have no capacity to distort global trade. But if you treat me as if I'm equal to a large nation, then you will kill me before I can even start. You destroy anything that I can do to keep my population alive in terms of manufacturing or in terms of whatever.
Yeah.
So that there is the old Aristotelian principle, equality for equals and proportionality for unequals. And if we were simply to use that and to recognize that you can't have the same one-size-fits-all prescription, you can't do it in a family, far less a country, far less a global community. And if we can get that, so many things that we've been trying to solve will find themselves in place. And part of the difficulty is that the new world post-1945 was still remade in an imperial order. So that all it talks about sovereignty and independent countries, you're independent so long as you do as I say, not even as I do. Because when they told us don't do quantitative easing and don't print money, the truth is when COVID hit, what did the developed world do? Digital printing, quantitative easing. And, so we have to find a way of letting some air, some oxygen, some transparency, some light, and to begin to see that the one-size-fits-all rule will not work, and that you have to be able to give a little elbow room. Not a lot, but a little elbow room for us to do the things that we need to do to keep our people alive, to keep our people prospering, to not cause our people to want to get into the things that you complain about globally in terms of migration or crime.
Yeah, I'm always been fascinated by the, like, sometimes what I think is very short-term thinking from some of the bigger nations. They'll often think about mass migration, but they don't seem to wonder why people are leaving the place that they're in. The first part of me goes like, maybe it's just an arrogance.
Here's an example.
Yeah.
They do things that literally shoot themselves in the foot and things.
In what way?
In 2006 and 7, there was a big debate about the International Criminal Court and the fact that the ICC, that the US heads of state and army, military people did not want to be subject to prosecution.
Right.
And they went around the world trying to get countries to agree that they should be exempted. And we in the Caribbean said, hey, we hear you, but one, it don't make sense because this is intended for all people.
Yeah.
But two, even if it wasn't, this is the idea of the former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Leonard Robinson. And as a matter of solidarity, as well as principle, we can't do it. They said, well, if you don't do it, we're going to withdraw all military aid from your countries. Wow. You say, okay, that's not a wise thing to do, but
Yeah,
we saw that for a year, 18 months, and eventually said, we're going to do it anyhow. What happens? Nature outgrows a vacuum. China, who never had any relationship with any of the military in the region really, then stepped in and developed a relationship with providing training and equipment and things thereafter. Does that make sense to a country that is so frightened for China?
See, when you're saying that, I wish more people understood, especially Western nations, quote unquote. I wish they understood how many of the problems they're experiencing are created in a cycle.
Yeah.
So friends and I were talking the other day, you can't talk about 9/11 without talking about Osama bin Laden. You can't talk about it without talking about Al Qaeda. But then you can't talk about it without talking about the CIA, which you then can't talk about without talking about the US and what it was trying to do about communism. And now, many of those people go, oh, we did the wrong thing, but the effects are felt so many years later. And what you're saying is the same. If you watch the news in America, if you watch the news in the UK, let's say the BBC, they'll very quickly say, China's expanding. We've seen China here, and China's in Africa, and China's in the Caribbean, China's doing this, China's... But I don't think I've seen any news reports that say, well, the US opened the door for China and the US reneged.
The North Atlantic countries have not necessarily treated the issue of development in the post-colonial era as well as they could have. We talk about official development assistance being 0.7% of GDP. Most countries don't even observe that. But for
As in that's a portion that they're supposed to contribute to developing their children. Yeah.
But countries like my own is, oh, you're doing anything, you don't need money from us. So we effectively don't get any aid from the USA or from Britain or whatever other than being part of a regional study or a regional thing that is done. And that's one of the things that we've been arguing, and I'll come to that in a bit, because that's at the core of a lot of the development issues that we are asked to be able to access capital from the official financial institution, international financial institution, on the basis of historic GDP per capita, which really doesn't, I tell people that is like taking in blood pressure 2 years ago to determine if I'm going to have a stroke today. So that what matters, because in 72 hours a hurricane can hit me.
Yeah.
And I can have wipeout risk. Now hurricanes can hit in Florida, and you don't have wipeout risk. Hurricane hits in the Bahamas or Dominica, it's gone.
Yeah.
And instead of dealing with qualitative issues in education, we're now dealing with basic access to schools again. So we make the point that the North Atlantic countries, for whatever reason, had the Caribbean and a lot of the other small island developing states in the Pacific, etc., in a certain prism. This is how they view you, this is how we're going to relate to you. And China and India and others come along and say, oh, these are some of your real development needs. Oh, you need a gymnasium, you need help building a port, you need help in doing roads. We're going to lend you the money at 3% or 2% or 4%. Who else is lending you that money? Nobody. So I think that, remember what I said, we want to be friends of all satellites of men. So we're not looking to be anybody's pawn. But at the same time, we're not looking to be disadvantaged or unfair because you don't believe I should talk to my neighbor. When in truth and fact, my neighbor's done me nothing. And then secondly, when I look at your circumstances, you have greater exposure with your treasuries to them than I have. The Chinese hold 4% of their debt. It can do me less than a hurricane can do me. where others who hold a far greater percentage of net debt, and the Chinese hold far greater percentages of debt in the developed world,
Right.
in the G7 countries.
It almost feels like a contradiction then in some ways. It's almost like some of the larger countries are basically restricting smaller countries from engaging in the best way, or even in an autonomous way, in the way that they feel is best for
But
them.
you see, you get it. So why do you get it? Because you've been exposed now to the facts. Tell me where in large developed countries are you exposing your population to the facts? Or is it purely an opiate diet that you give them with respect to entertainment and dulling down the senses and no real discussion? You look at the news at night and it's the same 5 stories being done on every channel when you look at this country or Britain or wherever. And the Jewish rabbi who I really truly respected, Jonathan Sachs, was the chief rabbi in London, wrote a series of books, and I'd encourage you to read them all. But one is The Dignity of Difference, which really talks about moving from broadcasting to narrowcasting. And of course, we all know it. I saw your last podcast on the impact of these devices on children.
Yeah.
And if you ask me one of the things that worries me at night, this is it. And I think left up to me, how can we came back into office to find that everybody had these things in schools? But we need to have a national and an international conversation as to how do we balance people's access to a world that is not there, that is in the hands of a child whose brain and his maturity is not yet fully developed.
Yeah.
You're going to tell them they can't smoke. Remember, we were children, we were told you can't drink coffee when you're young. It's not good for young children. But yet you give them this most powerful weapon.
Yeah, it shapes them, molds them, it influences them, yeah.
And at the same time, I've been arguing that you need to expose our kids to risk, because what do children want to play adults? They start at young and they can get away with it because they go and take their mother's makeup and their mother's shoes and whatever and they play in house. By the time they become teenagers, it gets a little more dangerous. They want to smoke, they want to ride a bike, they want to have sex, they want to do other things, girls. And I'm saying to them, we teach children how to cross the road as little kids, safely. How do we prepare them to manage other risks as they get older? And therefore, the educational transformation that we need is not to give people knowledge, because facts, for the most part, we have to be discerning, are found there in technology. What we need are the values and attitudes, the skills, the commitment to excellence in whatever you do, and empathy. Because you have to care about people. If not, you're going to be in trouble. And you have to do the best that you can do in everything that you do, however little, however small, however large. And you have to show them how they develop and mature, which is what we don't talk enough about, the social and emotional learning targets. What do you expect a child to say or do at 7, at 10, at 12, at 14, at 16? When hormones start to get in the way, how do you deal with that? Recognizing that relationships with parents are not always the easiest during that period of time. So how do you create a pressure cooker type thing where the steam can be taken off and the child just doesn't explode into some kind of, awful situation. So these are the things that matter. So I'm seeing more and more a world that is not allowing us to have the conversation sufficiently that we need to have. And regrettably, it means that at the level of international policy, where we're talking about an international diplomacy and power relationships, that some of the things that ought to make common sense are ignored, and then we only get to it when it becomes a crisis. So there's so many things that we can do better. And let's take climate. Okay, they say that there's no climate crisis.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is that whether we say it or not, the temperatures and the climate is not changing. There's a clear difference of opinion between those now who say there's no crisis and those who are frightened as hell that this is the greatest existential crisis that the planet will face.
Yeah.
So how do you bridge this moment in time? You've got to find a common love language. What do I mean? Methane is 80 times more dangerous than carbon. We talk about carbon all the time. But carbon stays in the atmosphere for hundreds of years. Methane stays in the atmosphere for 12 to 15 years. But it's 80 times more dangerous. Methane is generated from gas leaks and the flaring of gas. It's generated from how we raise our livestock and farm rice. It's generated from landfills. If we were simply to fix the pipes that are leaking and stop flaring the gas, because when you flare gas, you can't make money from it. If you were to capture the gas and if you were to fix the leaks, what would happen to the oil and gas companies? They'd get more money. That's their love language. What would happen to the planet? It would stop the destruction of it. That's our love language. And the scientists actually tell me that if we get this right in the next 15 years, we can actually reverse the temperature by half a degree. So what does that also do for the oil and gas companies? Oil and gas companies are not the villains. The emissions are. So if they can invest at scale for decarbonizing technology, then they can continue to have a longer route to run. And the controlling of the methane gives them the time
I'm gonna drop them in there.
to do the research
To get some
and to do what
decarbonization.
President Trump did with the COVID vaccines. Remember the
Operation Warp Speed, yeah, we've talked about that.
Yeah, Operation Warp Speed for methane. And that's what, I mean, I'd love to tell President Trump that. Because he gets what he wants, and the world gets what it needs.
How is this missing? I mean, you're saying this to me now.
I've said it a few times publicly, because I think the world
It's
needs-
logical. It's what you're saying to me doesn't. I'm trying to think of it in my head, and I'm going. I don't understand why this.
It's common sense.
So what's falling away? Is it companies that are trying to
I've been trying, I've been talking to
to
President Macron, I've been talking to a number of other leaders, and I'm saying, look, we need to have a face-to-face meeting with the oil and gas CEOs, because I actually believe that there is a win-win for us all. They have, remember Sting's song, I hope the Russians love their children too?
Yeah.
I believe that the oil and gas companies love their grandchildren. And unless they have a plan to live on Mars that they haven't shared with us yet, we're going to get this act right on Earth. I feel that if we can reach a legal agreement, just as we did with the Montreal protocols to cover I think it's called HFCs, I keep fixing it up in my head, but air conditioners and everything.
Oh yeah.
And the ozone.
Yes, yeah. Right.
And we've been successful in doing that. If we took the same approach to methane and had a global methane agreement, now the Europeans might get a little antsy on the livestock farming, but there are ways to deal with that as well. That will not stop the farmers from making money. The farmers in Asia who do rice, they may also get a little nervous, but I know that President Banga at the World Bank has already been working on how we can do things in terms of change and how we farm here. This is so simple, Trevor.
Yeah, but we
seem
to. It is simple, but it's
complex because you can't get people to change.
Yeah, but we come up with these solutions, or rather we find solutions when it's war. I've never seen a single war, and I've never watched a documentary, I've never read a book about any major war where people said we can't.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The atom bomb is an impossible idea. It is truly impossible. But nobody said we can't. They said find more scientists. They said find more brilliant people. They said find more pieces of land. They said they made it happen. You know, there's a $1 trillion jet that America will got right.
When I'm being facetious, I say if we can find a way to cure men's baldness, we can find a way to save the planet.
But is that the problem? Maybe is that the problem? Is it that we haven't found the right
priority?
Is it that maybe we haven't found the right lever? You know, because when you talk to most people about climate change, I don't think I'm being mean when I say most people don't necessarily care about it, or don't feel like they can afford to care about it on a daily basis, because it doesn't seem like the thing that impacts them now.
So let me,
Like we're so bad at seeing slow problems, you know what I mean?
yeah. So but let me put it, it's happening faster than we think, though.
Yeah.
Look at California this year. Look at the fires. I mean, it was apocalyptic.
Right.
Look at the fact that from as far back as probably 2-3 years ago, insurance companies started to say we're no longer insuring for fire risk.
Yeah.
Then let's look at southwestern US, Florida, Texas, Louisiana, all of those states, especially in Florida, we're getting insurance companies and in the Northern Caribbean starting to say, hey, I don't know if I want to insure you for flood. I don't know if I want to insure you for hurricanes. No. What, and I've been saying for a while, what becomes uninsurable eventually becomes uninvestable, whether it's a country, a sector, or a region. The financial system globally is premised upon insurance in many ways. You go to a bank, you want to borrow money for a car, insure the car. You want to borrow money for a house, a mortgage, insure the house. You want to borrow money for a company, these are the covenants that we require, and we require you to cover insurance.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to shipping days. That's back, yeah.
So when uninsurable becomes uninvestable, then the world is going to listen, because the financial markets and the financial companies and finance people of the world are going to say, hey, what's happening here? Now, Barbados, we are not the first, but we are the largest with respect to the issuance of commercial paper debt with natural disaster clauses. I could make this joke here because you would get it. We call it natural disaster clauses, and when we were back in the British and everybody came and gave it new names, just as they gave us new names when they brought us across the Atlantic. But they really accustomed to that. So, but these natural disaster clauses simply say this, and understand the internal logic. If I get hit by a hurricane tomorrow of a certain category, any and everyone, the first thing you're going to worry about if you let me money, are they going to pay?
Can they pay me back?
Yeah. And you price that risk into the cost of the paper that you're charging me. So I come along and say, hey, you don't have to worry. I'm going to give you a legal commitment that if you allow me not to pay for 2 years, well, I get my body strong again, my country strong again. Because I have a lot of uninsured people, which you know about, so the state has to step in.
Right.
If you give me that 2-year break, I'm going to back it up at the end of the payments. You remain whole. I'm not even asking you to take a haircut, which really and truly should. So I'm not asking you for the haircut. And you don't have to worry about whether I'm going to default or not. You're just giving me the ability to fix my stuff and move again. So we have to work hard, because if we get hit, these clauses now allow me to get just under 20% of GDP
People, I like to
released over a 2-year period for me to fix up.
For you to get back to the place where you can help people.
Exactly.
Yeah, it becomes a more sustainable model. Exactly. Like I'm listening to you saying this, and I'm going, I can't help but draw parallels between what's broken in many societies. Forget on a geopolitical level. I think about the United States. You look at what's happening in France right now, and then we can go to African countries, South Africa being one of them. The amount of people who are one car accident away from completely being destitute, the amount of people who are one medical procedure away from being completely wiped out, the amount of people who have one moment where forbearance is more. But what's mind blowing to me? What's mind blowing is I always wonder, why can't these companies who are in charge of this, why can't these companies see that the person being given an opportunity to get back to whole becomes better for them long term than by squeezing them when they have the very little that's left?
I gave a speech in Algeria last week, Thursday, Friday, where I quoted Derek Walcott, who is Nobel laureate for literature from St. Lucia. And there's a poem that he has that talks about the reassembling of the broken vase, and that the love that it takes to reassemble makes it stronger.
Oh yeah, it's the Japanese technique.
I'll send you the quotation when we finish here. And that's exactly the point that you're making. And that the country becomes stronger, the individual becomes stronger.
Yeah.
And what does it really require? An understanding of the circumstances, or maybe the practice of the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
But do you think that's become broken because corporations have an outsized power in all of these conversations? Like if you're a CEO and you're only working towards that quarterly report,
You don't see or hear anything else.
yeah, and all they're thinking about is, I need to make sure that this number in the next 3 months is bigger than the next number, is bigger than the next number, is bigger than the, and so what that then means is, you can't think long term. You can't think in a beautiful soft curve. You can't think in a way that's sustainable, I feel.
Which brings us back to the conversation about narrow casting and echo chambers. It brings us back to, there's some kids in the region that I met recently, and the parents said, emulate my child to watch something that is an hour long every day, because they are so consumed by quick 1 minute and 2 minute that their capacity to sustain attention and to think and to reason is compromised.
Yeah, I think it's more than that as well. I always find myself bristling when people say no one has an attention span, and I go, that's not true. I really don't believe it. Mm-hmm. And the reason I don't believe it is because somebody can stay on TikTok for 4 hours. Yeah. So they do have an attention span.
Yep.
I think
just what they're
I think what they've done is we've created a system, we've monetized the world, we're keeping you addicted to the drip. That means that you don't realize the long-term reward of exploring, understanding, misunderstanding, rereading, digging deeper, and then getting to the end of something where you go, oh wow, there's a moment where I knew nothing about this. There's another moment where I thought, then I lost, and at the end of it, what a beautiful expanse of information I now have.
Yeah, and it's a discipline that people had before, but I think that we need to get people to understand that we need to be able to discern and to explain and to understand. You don't have to agree with everything you read, but you need to understand what it is you're doing and why you disagree.
Don't press anything. We've got more. What now after this? You talk a lot about global debt. Mm-hmm. And I think you've had one of the most outsized influences in helping people understand why so many countries in the world are stuck in the positions that they're stuck in. Mm-hmm. You know, I grew up in a country where people, until this day, will say, oh, well, I mean, look at South Africa, they haven't, you know, and then I've seen them say that about African countries. Well, you know, Africa, they haven't done well for themselves. I mean, you can blame the European, but Africa hasn't done well for itself. And you talk about this global hypocrisy and inequity in a way that I think most people have never heard. And maybe you wonder, like, what do you think, what is one practice that you think is the most globally, you know, indefensible way in how larger countries are treating smaller countries?
And you know, right in saying larger companies too, because I think it's a form of bullying and a failure to put yourself in the position of the others and to craft rules that work for you but not for everybody. So let's look at, everybody knows the story of Greece with their economy. Greece and Ghana, I'm not talking about Ghana in the last post-COVID years, but just before COVID, Greece and Ghana had basically the same credit rating. But Greece was accessing money in the international capital markets at a fraction of what Ghana would access it. Part of it has to do with the safe assets, and part of it has to do with a lot of underlying assumptions that were made as you created these institutions. And if I want to get it as basic as I can, why should Europe determine who's the head of the IMF, and why should the USA determine who's the head of the World Bank? Doesn't South Africa have somebody who can head the World Bank? Doesn't India have somebody who can head the IMF? So a lot of these assumptions were made and rules were crafted in the image of a few, not of the many. And as a result, we've been paying the price of those rules that have not been touched, have not been deconstructed and reconstructed. And we have been paying the price as well that just doesn't matter enough. You know, okay, South Africa is having problems, okay, that's a conversation piece, okay, maybe there's too much corruption in Africa. What's happening in Europe and North America? You see the corruption out there? It takes two hands to clap. More often than not, it's a European or a North American investor in Africa who's driving the corruption.
Yeah.
And it takes two hands to clap. This makes no noise. So I think that bringing these things to light matters in terms of those who have a conscience need to say you're right. That's true. And those who don't have a conscience will find it more difficult to sustain the error of their ways.
You've said things that made me think of how we convince people differently, because I remember one day you said, and you'll correct me because I might paraphrase you incorrectly. You essentially said, we listen to people fighting about like migration and who's going where and who's going. We never think to ourselves, how can we pay somebody to stay in their country? And I saw you saying this. Yeah, I saw you saying this. Some people were like, "Oh no, you should never. How could you say such a thing?" Because I realized there's this idea around immigration that has been romanticized. You know, and I think maybe because I'm an immigrant and because I've been an immigrant in another country, I think sometimes people don't realize that for the most part, I'm not saying for everyone, but for the most part, people do not wish to leave their home.
They don't.
You know what I mean? Some people want to explore. Some people. But for the most part, people want to stay home. What chases them out is a war.
Yeah.
What pushes them out is a famine. What pulls them somewhere is an opportunity that they don't have where they're from. But if they had those things in the place that they were, you find that would stay their home forever. And when you said that, I remember thinking, this is wild that a world leader would say that. Pay people to stay in their country.
Yeah, and it may not be as cruel as that. It may be in terms of the development.
Yes, but it broke through when you said that.
But that's the point. And the thing is to get people's attention to start to think differently.
Yes.
Because what I find is that there are too many assumptions that we accept as rigid positions. Rather than, and the thing I say to my government, to my ministers all the time, to the country all the time, let us deconstruct and reconstruct. What is the public policy we're trying to serve? What is the public mischief we need to avoid? Has technology made it more possible or easy for us to do things in a way that we weren't doing it before? And if so, who are the winners and who are the losers? Because if you don't see people, you're doing nothing. There will always be somebody who will suffer as a result of the change in the status quo, and there will always be somebody potentially who can benefit. But sometimes you need to go in, just like a sculptor, and you need to just smooth it out. Because even though you're going in one direction, you may find that that's an outlier that you really need to bring back, and if not down the line, it'll lead to X, Y, Z.
How do you maintain your hope being such a small nation? Because I always think to myself, Barbados to me is the perfect analogy for what many humans feel in life. They feel small, they feel insignificant, they feel like an afterthought. And yet every day you will go out and you'll meet with other world leaders who will give you the time. You will speak at the United Nations, knowing full well that many of the nations that you're speaking to see you as an insignificant part of the conversations that they're having. So I guess it's two questions really. One is, where did that hope come from and what keeps it going? And the second part of it is, how have you found, or what have you found enables you to make an outsized impact relative to where you're coming from?
Let me say that hope is human. Without hope, you lose your humanity ultimately. I feel so strongly. You have to believe that the next minute, the next moment, the next month, the next year can in fact be better, even if you're going through the hardest of times. At the same time, I've always relied on the fact that God and time and circumstances can be allies. God for faith, time because We have a saying in Barbados, we ain't catch it in passing.
Wine catching in pass, yeah?
Yeah,
Oh,
we
I
ain't
like
catch it
that.
in passing.
I
So
like that.
just because we haven't caught you yet, it hasn't passed you either.
Oh, I like that.
And in terms of circumstances, things happen. And we don't necessarily be part of the divine if you're a person of faith, or things just happen if you don't.
Yeah.
And why is my voice on climate resonating more today? Because of the floods in Pakistan, because of countries in Africa that are going through famine and locusts, because of wildfires in Greece and California.
Yeah.
Those are the circumstances. Time, because 20, 30 years ago when Al Gore was telling us about an inconvenient truth, nobody wanted to listen. So circumstances and time and faith have a way of conspiring to create that opportunity, even regardless of how small you are. And as you learn in the stories of David and Goliath, regardless of how large you are.
Do you think that
And the fact that, let me give you a small example. South Africa plays cricket. And Nelson Mandela made the point that when he was in prison, learning about the conquest of the West Indies cricketers, beating the British, beating the Australians in the 1960s, that just gave him such a sense of warmth and hope, and you understand? And that's what it does for ordinary people. So Barbados, as small as we are, before we are, there was Sir Garfield Sobers, Gary Sobers, the greatest cricketer of all time. You go to Australia, they'll tell you who's the greatest cricketer of all time, all round, Gary Sobers. You go to England, Gary Sobers. You go to India, Gary Sobers. He's still living. He's our first living national hero, Yala Jorrington, a few years ago. And for me, you know what's special? Both of them grew up within a mile of Bridgetown in humble circumstances. And both of them claim to be the greatest of all in the field that they have been practicing in. So smallness and poverty and circumstances of birth or geography do not define us. And that must always, always, always be kept uppermost in our minds and as we raise our children. Nobody's better than us, and we're not better than anybody. But we have the capacity to be the best that we can be, and sometimes our best will actually be better than everyone else.
Talk to me about the Bridgetown Initiative.
Yeah. So that's just a way of us being able to encapsulate a lot of what we've been discussing.
Yeah, but it's so fascinating. Please just talk us through it, because I think regardless of where you're from, it's great to hear, you know, amazing ideas that could shape any corner of the globe. Talk to me about the idea, its inception, and what you hope it achieves.
So we realized that the things that we've been speaking about aren't unique to us. And a few years ago I said, look, let me bring together a number of the people globally that have been meeting, that have been agreeing with us, that fundamentally believe that things must change. And some of them came from mainstream, within the financial
So you gotta pay
institutions
attention,
everywhere.
people.
Some of them from
So
outside,
you see
some of them from
when
NGOs.
now, if I say I
And we
was on
got
my
more
phone
Barbados a
and I'm
few
not
years
paying
ago.
attention,
And
that
we
would have been in
started
my
the discussion
face.
to frame up how can we bring greater transparency and equity and opportunity to countries so that we could achieve the sustainable development goals and at the same time we could save the planet.
Yeah.
We are on the front line of the climate crisis. There's no two ways about it. I mean, for 6 months of the year, you worry about a hurricane. For the other few months of the year, Barbados is one of the 15 most water scarce countries in the world. 2 years ago, we actually had 50% of our 30-year rainfall in the first few months of the year. It's real. When we brought everybody together, we realized that, look, we need to make a major statement and to go after a set of reforms globally. You heard me speak about the fact about the need for inclusion. Why should the head of the IMF be a European and the head of the World Bank be an American? That's a deal that was done by a few boys in a club decades ago.
Yeah.
But it doesn't apply to the world that you and I live in today.
It also doesn't necessarily mean that the best mind is
It's
doing the
definitely
job.
not. Yeah, exactly. You may have the best mind, but you may not.
Yeah.
What we want is opportunity. Let's deal with the Security Council. We have 5 countries that are the permanent 5. But then you have other countries outside it, like India, that has over what, 1.4 billion people out of 8 billion people in the world, and they all sit on the permanent flight. Now Africa, and I'm not talking about individual countries in Africa because I keep making the point that the day that Africa gets its act together and becomes the United States of Africa, then you have Africa, India, and China. And don't tell me about ethnicities or boundaries drawn because India has as many ethnicities, or Africa has more than India, but India has hundreds of ethnicities and languages.
Yeah.
But they found a way to stay whole as a nation state. So that why shouldn't Africa be represented on the Security Council as a permanent member? Why should they have to go and fight for an election for a different country every other year to get on? Let us look at, they talked about the per capita GDP as the basis. Why should I have to pay more money to borrow money for development when I am more vulnerable and we're not taking into account my vulnerability in terms of the cost of capital, the interest rates that you're charging? But you're asking me to use the notion that, oh, you've come out of poverty. So what do? You put me back on an escalator to be popularized again because you're charging me now too much money. And I'm spending more money in interest than I'm spending in health and education. That makes sense to you? No. So these things all started to come together. And as we went, we realized that there are issues pertaining to trade, there are issues pertaining to recently the credit rating agencies because they have a significant and some argue disproportionate impact
On they determine where money goes.
and the cost of it.
Exactly.
So all of these things we're saying, look, let's pause. New York is a lovely place to be, London is a lovely place to be, Zurich is a lovely place to be, but guess what? It's a closed club. And a closed club is not necessarily working for us because it doesn't make sense. In COVID, I was told as a country that, oh, you can't benefit from things that we would like to give you, therapeutics, vaccines, etc., because your per capita income is too high. You're upper middle income in the country. I said, but that got nothing to do with people in over here, or the fact that you don't have ventilators, or the fact that you don't have vaccines. And when it really mattered, who was it that helped us? It wasn't the North Atlantic countries. We asked, we had export restrictions put on us for equipment coming out of the US. We had the UK refuse to give us even 10,000 vaccines, far less whatever. Prime Minister of India stood up. They gave us 100,000 vaccines. I could have kept them all for Barbados, but when you live in a small community in the neighborhood,
Damn fair.
fair. So we keep some and we gave to our brothers and sisters in the rest of the region, however small it was. Then Dr. Tedros at WHO said, and Uhuru Kenyatta said to me, I want you to meet Strive and see because the African countries have asked him to put together the African Medical Supplies Platform.
Yeah.
And we believe, I was chairing the Caribbean community at the time, and we believe that there may be some opportunities there. I called Strive. Next thing we got the Caribbean countries on that platform. So a country as small as St. Kitts and Nevis with 38, 40,000 people could access goods at the same price as a country in Nigeria with over 270 million people. And it meant that therapeutics, vaccines, equipment, all of that started to come together. And that the financing would be provided by the Afrexim Bank out of Africa. Good things happened. That made a huge difference to us. Since then, Afrexim Bank decided to come into the region. They've now signed partnership agreements with all the member states. They've now opened their first office outside of Africa in Barbados. And the whole African Renaissance in the Caribbean in the last few years has been growing. When we came to office, I said to the population, we want a project called Reclaiming Our Atlantic Destiny. We define by middle passage coming across, so we don't reclaim it now. I told you about the 1661 stage plan. We have a duty now to shape the world in a way that makes sense for us. And the Caribbean is part of the diaspora, which is the sixth region of Africa. And we are proud of it, but we also have to do some serious repair. There is no direct link by boat or by plane that is scheduled between Africa and the Caribbean. And yet between Barbados and Africa, there is no landfall. Explain it, make that make sense to me.
So, you know what this makes me think of? And I wonder if there's anything similar in your history, but in South Africa, there was a thing that my grandmother introduced me to because she was part of it. And I just watched her. They called it a society.
Mm-hmm.
And what it was a collection of all the old grannies, and they would put money into a collection pot, right? Just their own money, a small amount of money they would put together. You know, so let's just say dollars, because everyone, you know,
So now you are
so
going
you
to
put in your $10, and this group of 20, 30 women would put their $10 in every month. And every month, that fund, that little kitty, would then give one of the grannies a lump sum of money.
You know what happened?
Why?
That's a susu.
That's what it's called?
That's susu.
Susu?
And I then learned, actually, only a couple of weeks ago, that in Nigeria, they call, I think, isusu or something very similar.
Oh, so it's very similar in that, yeah.
In Barbados, we call it either susu or meeting turn.
Yes.
And that you take your turn out of the meeting money, and everybody puts in the piece, and that is how families were sustained.
Exactly. But when you look at what it's trying to do, it built this system where people realized on the smallest level, as Black South Africans, they were unbanked, they couldn't get loans, they couldn't get access to any funds that would enable them to do something that required more money than they had at that moment. But if they were put in a little bit, each person every month was getting a lump sum, and then some of it was kept aside in case there was a tragedy, like a funeral, a death that was unexpected, etc. And then over time, and I've seen this happen in like some parts of Africa, some intrepid business people have realized that a market exists where people told them it didn't, and they've gone in and said, hey, we'll bank you even though you were unbanked. We'll connect you to the financial systems. You know, even the things you're talking about now.
Is a perfect example.
Yeah, with M-Pesa. Yeah, M-Pesa.
Yeah. And remember, all the European banks pulled out of Kenya.
Yeah.
And risk that the European banks would never have taken.
But what is it?
The Kenyan banks took.
Yeah, but this is the thing I find But this is what I find fascinating. There's like, they say risk, right? But Mark Zuckerberg will wake up tomorrow and tell us he's lost $100 billion on a virtual reality world that never happened. Straight faced. They'll go, it's gone. You know? We'll talk about risk. You know, those major companies that were invested in partially by these same countries, they lost all the money and it's just gone.
And you just hit what the Bridgetown Initiative is about. It's about fairness. We started the conversation with Rihanna about that. It's about fairness. That's why Bridgetown's name is put to it. It's about decolonization. It's about creating opportunities and bringing light in. And we're not asking for any special favor. We're asking just for transparency and fairness. And remember what I said, equality for equals, proportionality for unequal. And that's what the Bridgetown Initiative is about.
Let me ask you this before I let
And it
you go.
gets technical for the economists and finances in terms of the capital adequacy framework and the ratios and all that. But fundamentally, this is what it's about, fairness.
When you speak to people who are from larger countries, when you speak to somebody who's in England, in the United States, in France, wherever they may be, how do you make them see, or what do you say to them that helps them understand why their fate is tied to yours when it doesn't seem apparent?
Well, I think climate, as I said, has done a great job, circumstances, in proving that point for us. Because they begin to see similarities in what's happening. The difference is that because we're small, we have wipeout risk. They don't. They can live to see another day. They can live to find a way to build resilience.
Yeah.
So that works. And the truth is that when you get in front of most people, people get it.
Yeah, it's actually true.
What happens is the lack of audience, the lack of voice. And that's why I genuinely believe that if I were to sit in front of President Trump tomorrow and say, look, let's do this thing with methane.
So you guys, that's the thing?
Not since he back this time.
Okay.
You guys can drill baby drill and we can see the planet. You understand? And it's a perfect love language. But what it does require is leadership from the G7 or G8 or whatever you want to call it. And that's why I said to President Macron, Emmanuel is a good friend. We've worked together on a number of things. President Ruto himself and Barbados, we're working on how do we finance. I actually feel that if there were a bank was created today, it would be created with a different purpose. 80 years ago, we created a bank that needed to help with the reconstruction because of World War II. Okay? And I can give you all the examples of the discriminatory treatment, including the fact that you allow Germany to cap its debt service payments on the basis of its export, percentage of its exports, or that UK took 100 years to repay for World War I. But yet you want me to borrow and pay back for school in 15 years or a hospital. Makes no sense. We need longer term, cheaper capital in order for the developing world to get where it needs to get and to stop the migration that you're complaining about and to have structured arrangements for labor movement and labor shortages. But if we go back to all of this, we find that, look, the absence of that capacity to have cheaper money and cheaper capital is actually making the world unfair. Transpose it as you did to populations. The rich get access to loans on a phone call, and the poor have to depend on a susu or a meeting church if they're lucky. And it is that absence of fairness that I believe that if we get in the same room, most human beings do have empathy. Most human beings do care about fairness. But when you're in a large corporation, as you said, and you're pushing for quarterly returns and all of these things, you can hide behind all of that. But if I confront you face to face, you're actually going to say, you know you're right. You know that I'm fair. And we start to begin, even if it is going to be complex for you to deconstruct, we start the process and we at least agree on the destination, and then we start to discuss the modalities for reaching that destination. And climate has come at a time that maybe if I was reading 15, 20 years ago, I'd just remain a voice in the wilderness. But the global circumstances, and in fact, the democratization of voice, because of technology, has created the capacity for a movement to start to build globally. And I'm not the one who started it, I'm not the one who's going to finish it. I just happen to be one of the travelers along the way. And I will do my best. There's a part of the Talmud that says that we are not expected to complete the task, but we neither are we at liberty from resigning from it. And I use the metaphor of the relay all the time. And that is why I say to you that we have to do our part. And while I'm doing my part where I am, and I'm not a prime minister, I do the work of a prime minister. That's not who I am. I'm here. So for as long as I'm here, I'll do that part of it. But there's going to be a time when I'll be like Trevor. And I will choose other modalities to be able to bring about and influence people. And a conversation at its smallest in a block, in a community, is exchange and persuasion. It's no different at the international level. The problem is that at the international level, you're not given access to the room. Shirley Chisholm, who, as you know in this country, was the first Black American congresswoman, Beijing Roots, was actually schooled in Barbados, gave credit to her Barbadian schooling and grandmother for defining who she was as a person. She was the first woman to dare, of Black origin, to dare to run for president in a established political party in this country. We go back and listen to her speeches, they are as relevant today as they were then. But she said one major thing that continues to remind me, well, a few things actually, but one, if they don't have a chair at the table for you, bring your folding chair. And that's what we've had to do.
I like that.
Bring our folding chair to the table.
That's sort of what Ethiopia has just done. I mean, what we were just speaking about is Ethiopia has been trying for a long time to build a dam, and I know it hasn't come without its political, sensitivities with Egypt and other countries that are downstream from the Nile, but it's really revolutionary what they've done, because Ethiopia wanted to build a dam that they needed to generate electricity for a region that covers how many millions of people?
Well, the population of Ethiopia is over 100 million,
Right.
and only I think just over 50% of their population have access to electricity.
Yeah.
And if you talk to anyone about the story of Africa, the biggest problem in Africa is that when the world is talking about technology,
Yeah.
600 million people, out of 1.4 billion, do not have electricity.
Yeah.
And the World Bank is committed to doing 300 million, and I thank Ajay for that. But what's happening to the other 300 million? The world has more than enough money to finance it. And the fact that they're using a dam means that they're using renewable energy that is not becoming a drag on the planet as well.
But how they funded it was fascinating.
That's the story of resilience.
That's the most fascinating story. They asked for a loan from the International Bank.
And the bank's international community refused to fund it for whatever reasons.
Huh?
And the Ethiopians turned inward. And between the central bank and the banks in Ethiopia and the ordinary citizens, it's a mind-blowing story. Bonds, citizens giving donations. And I said to the Prime Minister 2 days ago, to Abiy, I said, look,
Well,
you know that this
these are things
is
a lot of
the
been
21st century
been
Adwa.
using it, so
And
that's
in
why.
fact, those who don't know about Adwa, Adwa is the battle where
These are
Ethiopia
the
beat
things you have to
Italy in
make sure you pay attention
1896.
to.
Nobody believed it would have happened. And Ethiopia came together, and it took them almost 2 years in the long trek, and they rose majestically.
Why? Because
Adwa is what led to the beginning of the Pan-African movement. The New York Times, when you go to the museum in Addis Ababa,
that's what I'm
that
telling you.
commemorates
Gotta be
Adwa,
there.
you
Because
see
the
the New York
amount of
Times
patience that man
articles
have, the man
showing
if you
that
put
this
on your name,
little African country,
it don't mean nothing.
where my domain is much
That's
bigger
what I'm
than
telling
Italy,
you.
beat the great Italians. And
Yeah, but
out of this then came
that woman
the
is like a
Italian movement.
computer. Her
It's
brain
what
is
black
like a
people
computer.
can
She don't need
achieve someday
computer.
after centuries
But
of domination and subjugation. And out of
Yep.
that came the glory of the
Yep.
Pan-African movement.
That brain of
The
hers,
conferences out
I
of the
don't know where she get it
1945
from, but
Manchester Conference, which really was the last major one before the independence
hell
movement
yeah.
in Cuba, and all of the others coming out. So for me, this engineering piece, the biggest dam in Africa, is like
It's a lot
2
of
kilometers
African.
wide, 550 feet high. I mean, you
A
have
lot
to
of
see it to
African.
believe it, and you've never
His,
seen water.
his
move at
patient
that
is
speed.
mostly
And
African.
even after they take the water that they need for
That's
the
all.
dam to generate the electricity,
Then do what?
it overspilled. It's capacity
Brown
that
stew
I've
chicken
never seen it.
and food.
And that they could do it. And the world said no. It took them 14 years, but they did it.
So do you think there's a future where smaller countries and countries that have been cast aside start to think like this, or what do you think is a possibility that the larger countries who are being pushed by corporations will put their thumb on the scale to block that from happening? Because if Barbados, South Africa, random countries come together and say, you know what, let's do our own little projects. Let's get our susus going. Let's get our societies together. Maybe I'm a little paranoid. I feel like there are companies and countries who have been benefiting this for a long time who would go, no, we don't want you to do that, even though we're not going to help you do it for yourself.
Because the status quo changes. And most people don't want it. Those who are in control of the levers of power don't want the status quo to change. By the same token, I've also been around long enough to know, and I think you've seen it in South Africa, that some of the very same people who were opponents eventually become converts.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that is why I believe first always in dialogue. And that's why even what happened with Charlie Kirk, I think is regrettable and horrific, because violence is never the answer. Violence is the mechanism by which a few retain instant gratification or instant power, but it doesn't sustain you in the long run. And I think that the ability to have conversation must always be our first option. So I'm more than prepared to be able to say, look, let us look and see how we can free up
banana
capital to be able to help those who really need it.
So now,
And
that's
quite
how we
frankly, I can lose weight.
stew chicken.
In terms of even debt
Do its
sustainability,
thing.
I use the metaphor of losing weight.
You don't.
Partly because it's a personal challenge. You
Yep.
know what I'm saying? But you can lose weight at £2 a month, £3 a month, £6 a month, £10 a month. There comes a point at which the rate at which you lose it is unsustainable.
Yeah, it's unsustainable, man.
And we said simply to the international community in the Richland Initiative that the rate at which you want us to achieve that sustainability as developing countries in the world is too stark. And that if you do that, I can bring back down debt overnight because I can negotiate new terms.
Yeah.
But I cannot replace a generation of persons in under 15 to 20 years.
Yeah.
So let us understand what is immutable and what can change. And quite frankly, what you think is immutable is immediately renegotiated in a compromise agreement between lawyers and financiers. What I'm telling you cannot be changed is a lost generation.
And hearing you say this, I think back to some of the points in our conversation. Populations declining, skills in short supply in many places in the world, people not feeling like there's upward mobility. All of these, I feel like we can sort of draw a circle around, and the Venn diagram of all of them becomes the singular idea of giving people a chance. And what I mean by that is, when you're talking about a population, I often wonder why so many governments and corporations can't see the direct link between their actions and why people wouldn't want to have a child. They're very quick. I've seen, whether it's the Elon Musk who go, this is the greatest challenge we're facing. People are not having enough children. And I go, yeah, but why would you want to have a child in a world where you cannot pay for that child's schooling, where there is no health care for that child,
Yep.
where you don't know where the next meal for that child is going to come from?
Yep.
You don't need to provide people. You don't create the environment that is necessary for them to want to expand.
And if your state is not going to catch the ball for you,
Exactly.
then why do it?
Exactly.
So that's why, and you ask me why. Because in Barbados we believe that we have a responsibility to provide for every child education, from pre-primary to tertiary. The last government removed tertiary education, free tertiary education. The first thing we did when elected, even as we were entering an IMF program, was to reintroduce free tertiary education for Bajans at the University of the West Indies at Cape Hill campus. Because without education, the opportunities are simply not going to be there, and the capacity to reason with people will not be there. By the same token, we provide access to healthcare that I do more,
About
but we
folks.
do more than most countries of the world, quite frankly. And I think that in understanding that, you then begin to say to the finances, that's why I need 30 years or 40 years to pay back for the construction of a school or a hospital, because I need to make sure that the people in whom I'm investing are now earning to help me pay back that debt at that point in time. But if you give me 10 or 15 years to do it, everything bunches up, and I'm not yet at the stage where I have the capacity to repay, given the investment that I've made in people.
Yeah, my mom always used to say you need to give the tree long enough time to bear fruit.
Absolutely.
And if you let it grow long enough, you can keep plucking fruit forever.
That's the point. And it's so basic that if we can, and that's why I say to you, that you have the ability, you and others, you and Ava DuVernay and others who are storytellers, who are communicators, more than anything else, we need the world to hear the message. And as a prime minister or as a political figure, you immediately devalue what I say by 70%, because politicians don't carry this weight that you will carry as a comedian, as an entertainer, that she will carry as a producer and a director, that Usain Bolt or Gary Solis will carry as a sportsman, or Rihanna will carry as an artist. You have the ability to reach people when they are vulnerable and willing to hear. And that's it.
We start like this.
Exactly.
We start like this, and then our next conversation on the road playing
In Barbados.
in Barbados.
But I'm not going to be playing with tennis with you. I'm going to get some of my constituents to do it.
As any good leader does. Know when you are not the best person for the job. That's the mark of a good leader.
I will arrange it and manage it and even commentate for you.
It's on. Prime Minister Marty, thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, I mean, one of my favorite things about listening to you is
My name is Ian, by the way.
oh no, I mean
Please.
yes, but in my culture, let me call you that, and what my people will say to me. Yeah, I acknowledge it. No, I think I hope you don't take for granted. We live in a world where so many world leaders either can't or don't feel the need to break down some of the most complicated issues that people are experiencing in the world. And then they turn around and are shocked by people protesting in the streets, burning things down, or even just losing complete faith in the system that exists. They go, why won't people vote? And yes, but why won't you listen to them when the voting isn't what's the most important thing at that time? And I think what I've always appreciated about you is you take the time to break down the concept. You take the time to see what someone you don't agree with is seeing, and you put a concerted effort into doing what I think all great leaders should do, which is educating us about the world that we live in. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. When our last rebellion in 1937, the theme was educate, don't agitate.
I like that. Educate, don't agitate.
Well, I mean, sometimes you need to, but at that time, that's what they said.
Every revolution has a different thing.
Yeah, and I want to thank you for the opportunity for this conversation. And I want to thank you for making us laugh. There's a great Trinidadian capsule in the Nike Chocolates, and it says, you either have to learn to laugh or you go mad and write your epitaph. So keep us laughing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
See that, people? That was an hour and a
Thanks so much for
half.
watching the episode. If you enjoyed it, pass it on to a friend.
That was
If
like
you
an hour
didn't
and a
enjoy
half.
it, pass it on to your friends still. Let them suffer for a
that
change.
episode.
And don't forget to engage with us in the
That's
comments.
how long
If you
it
want
took to cook
to
that.
suggest a guest, maybe there's questions
Hour and
you
a half.
want, maybe there's ideas that you have,
See
you
that?
can chat to us. We will read through the comments and we'll get into it. Either way, I appreciate you taking
It's
the time.
4:12 right
Thank you for
now.
hanging out with us on What Now.
It's
And remember,
almost
we do
done.
this for you, so we would like to
Just
hear from
a
you.
cook
Till
down
next
right
time.
now.
Thank
But
you.
almost done. So I'm saying? That's how easy it is to cook, people. So don't let nobody tell you that cooking is hard. See? That episode, that whole entire episode that you guys just listened to, I think it was like an hour and a half on that episode. Right? An hour and a half. So it took me an hour and a half to cook my brown stew chicken, dumpling, and banana. And that's just the chicken was seasoned up already. So all I did was just, do the cooking part. So it took an hour and a half. Yeah, pretty much you just simmer down a little bit more. So give it about another 10 minutes or less. And it should be 100% complete. So cook it down a little bit.
What happens if BJ's and they have cheese? They don't let cheese don't work.
What kind of cheese?
They have those.
Oh, the sliced cheese. Everything has been kind of crazy with this whole tariff and all of these foolishness with the government do. So all of these things may be a part of it. Maybe they used to get a lot of their things from probably overseas, and now they have to fall back. That's the thing with these tariff is creating havoc in a lot of different ways. So I'm always telling us so no need to go along to school and get good education and come turn politician. Politician is who have the control of people's life. So what Donald Trump do right now, him can control pretty much people's life. Everything he want, he do. And nobody dare to say no.
Say no.
Huh?
can't send it. Even if you try to send it.
Yep. Cause every
you
minute
found your mic?
he might hit you with some type of tariff. Right now he want Greenland. And if he not get Greenland, tariff I go turn up. This is what he does.
Where we at tonight? We in Brooklyn, New York. Brooklyn, New York.
Saturday, I'm going to Albany.
Yeah, go when you gotta.
I'm visiting a friend. They invited me to some event over there, so I'm going. And I'm not saying it on campus.
How you get to Albany?
Sorry.
So you drive go all the way to Albany? Just watch yourself on that road, you know. Okay. This road here, and you need to make sure so everything good on that car, you know. You take long trip, you need to check that car, you know. Okay. Cause you better either check it or you better have tour money. Cause anything can happen on road. And you better make sure you not drive up and down with nobody in your car where smoke, you know. Okay? And nobody where think they can carry around weapon and stuff like that, you know. You better remember these things because anything happen, your ass will go to jail. You remember that? Oh, because if anybody get catching at that car and them don't own up to whatever in that car, you remember that everybody going to jail. Oh, so you tell you, you know, every day, you know, you're young and you do something, you know, where you don't understand where you play without a road, you know. Every day you left out there, all me can do is just pray for you, you know. Oh, cause you think I just up and just up and just up and just up. And that's how this thing work. Oh, you see what's going on in this flipping country right now? It's sad, but guess what? Me not go put my mouth a ground and say, Ray, no. Me see the climate. And when you start moving around and you move to different places, you have these racist police. Oh, very racist. You better make sure you know who you are traveling with in your vehicle. That much me can tell you. But like me tell you, when the hotter claps come, ain't nobody there. The people them when you think you run back and you run down, will they be there for you? You make sure you ask that question. Oh, sometimes when I like a run back at people, that same if you done is that same person, would they run behind you? Oh, nothing gonna obligate it to people or something. Not obligate it to nobody. Oh. So as I say again, keep on warning you, you know. You know what you do. Oh. Cause I don't have no money if you come bail you out of jail. I tell you that much. Not a dollar. And no matter how me talk to you, you know, you go through 1 year and you come through the next one. So, just I give you full warning. I make you understand. When me I grew up, my father said don't do Ray. Me make sure me don't do Ray, cause me know say you know what? And him alone did it. If he come do whatever. So me try to stay my backside out of trouble. Oh. And one friend me really and truly ever have. And I O'Neal. And me say Ray, other than that, you not see me, you not see me there nobody yard, you not see me I run back on nobody nah nothing. Not even when time me used to have you have girlfriend and girlfriend, whatever. Not even in a fit them house, me nah go. Like, because guess what? Anything can go on. Oh, you don't know what people have in their house. Oh, police raid that place. Dog name your supper. Oh, you remember that? Just a warn you, just a make you know. Not try if you stop your friend already, but you reach a age right now where you have to know. But I only hope you do know. Cause you practically is an adult. So you better make sure you know yourself. Here you go.
Thank you.
Cause one thing me nah do, as me say, I never put myself in a jail. And
You want my help?
that's not yam, that's potato. Carry come if you don't want it. And I will not put on the plate for you make the gravy start leak all over the place. I will not.
Who's that upstairs?
Chloe's home. Chloe,
Yeah?
dinner is ready if you want.
What happened?
Dinner is ready if you're ready.
First, I came down just at the perfect time.
Did you? Did you really?
You ready for eat?
Are you sure not 3 plates? Oh, no, 2 plates for me.
That's for eating.
Oh.
Are you gonna eat, yes or no?
Yeah.
What you want?
I'll take.
Me a dumpling, me a banana, me a potato.
I'll get potato, a dumpling, and then a leg, please. Pour me back the water too, please.
Alright, folks, guess what? This is where it comes to an end. Bye. How that I say, hi Uncle Terry. Celine Morgan. Hi. I'm not sure who that, but hi.